Hi, readers. Welcome to our lesson for today. So, as you know, we are starting the novel The One and Only Ivan for our reading class tomorrow. But I was noticing that as we get ready to read this, there is a lot of rich, beautiful, figurative language in The One and Only Ivan. It's what makes the story one of my favorites and brings the characters to life so very well. So I thought what we would do today is spend some time with figurative language. What does that mean, right? What is that? So our objective, what we're going to accomplish today. Students, that's you, will learn different types of figurative language, also called literary devices, and be able to identify them by taking a short quiz. Now, readers, don't panic. The short quiz is a quiz in which you can go back and look at this slideshow. I even have for you a guide that has a quick look at all these types of figurative language. So it's not something I want you to memorize, but I want you to become familiar with these with me. And they are something that you will work with for many years of reading. So this is a good time to get exposed to them and just practice getting to know these types of figurative language. So what is figurative language, you might be wondering? Well, figurative language is when you use a word or a phrase that does not have a literal meaning. Now you might think, what does that mean? Literal meaning. A literal meaning is that if it doesn't have a literal meaning, it's not saying exactly what it sounds like. It doesn't mean exactly what it sounds like. Here are some examples. She was like a bear in the morning. Now, she wasn't actually a bear in the morning, but she was like a bear in the morning means probably, right, that she got up kind of grumpy and grouchy and ornery. It is raining cats and dogs outside. Now, that does not mean that it's actually raining cats and dogs outside. It means it's raining really hard, right? Or a lot of rain is coming down. Mrs. Halverson heard the last cookie calling her name. Now, scholars, she didn't actually hear the last cookie calling her name. Miss Halverson, Miss Halverson. But it means, right, she kept thinking about it. So it was like it was calling to her. Bow wow, barked the dog. Right? The dog doesn't actually say bow wow. That's how we associate the sound of a dog barking. So let's dig a little deeper into these. So today we will be learning about several different kinds of figurative language. We will learn about similes, metaphors, personification, onomatopoeia, oxymoron, alliteration, hyperbole, and idiom. So, scholars, if you were counting those up with me, there's 8 types of figurative language that I'm going to introduce you to today. And then we're going to work with them throughout the One and Only Ivan book, and then you'll see them still even more after that with additional things we're reading this year. So let's start with simile. A simile compares two things using like or as. Examples. Ripley is as lazy as a sloth. Notice how it has the word as. Right? Now, Ripley's not actually a sloth. It's just saying, right? The sentence is telling us that Ripley is as lazy as a sloth, meaning, right, he moves really slowly, right? Kind of lays around a lot, just hangs out. Right? And I see the word as. She was fast like a cheetah. Right? She's not actually a cheetah. It's just saying, right? It's giving us information comparing her to her speed to the speed of a cheetah. The movie was as boring as watching paint dry. So in this one, scholars, the movie wasn't actually watching paint dry. The movie was that boring, right? Think how boring it would be just sitting there after you've painted, watching the paint dry. So all three of these, right, have the word as or the word like, and they're comparing two things. Ripley to the sloth, she to the cheetah. The movie being boring, like watching paint dry, is boring. So that's a simile, comparing two things using the words like or as. Now, a metaphor, scholars, is like a simile. It also compares two things, but does not have the word like or as. Here are some examples of that. The snow is a white blanket. Well, scholars, we've all seen snow here in Minnesota. The snow isn't actually a white blanket, it's comparing, right, the snow to being like a white blanket. But did you notice it doesn't have the word like or the word as? He is a shining star. Now, he isn't actually a star. It's letting you know, right, that he's very bright, very shiny, right, without the word like or as. Tom's eyes were ice when he looked at her. Now, do you think Tom's eyes were actually ice? No. It just means, right, they were cold, right? Maybe glaring when he looked at her, right? That ice cold look. But again, not the word like or as. So it's comparing snow to blanket, he to star, and Tom's eyes to ice without using the word like or as. Personification. Personification is when non human things or animals are given human qualities or characteristics. Here are some examples of that, because that might sound a little bit confusing right now. My alarm clock yells at me to get out of bed every morning. Right? Well, of course, the alarm clock does not actually yell, "Get out of bed!" But the alarm clock, right, is sounding like a yell to get out of bed. Right? Alarm clocks can't actually yell. The moon played hide and seek with the clouds. The moon can't actually play hide and seek. But this sentence lets you know, right, that it keeps, right, appearing and then disappearing, right, with the clouds blocking it. The dog smiled at her owner. Right? Now, dogs can't actually smile. They can look happy, but they can't actually smile. So, giving human qualities or characteristics to things that are not human. Right? Alarm clocks don't actually yell. Moon doesn't actually play hide and seek. The dog doesn't actually smile, although there are ways for our dogs to show us they are happy. Onomatopoeia. That one's fun to say, isn't it? Onomatopoeia. So, onomatopoeia makes words from sounds. So, onomatopoeia, scholars, are words that sound like the word. Here are some examples. Hiss, right? The word hiss sounds like someone hissing. Hiss. Sizzle, right? The word sizzle sounds like something sizzling. Sizzle. Pop, right? Pop sounds like something popping, right? Pop. So their onomatopoeias are words that sound like the sound those words make. An oxymoron. So an oxymoron contradicts or goes against itself. Oxymoron. Here are some examples. Jumbo shrimp. Have you ever heard of jumbo shrimp? So it's an oxymoron because it goes against itself, right? When we think of something as being jumbo, we think of it as being gigantic, ginormous, huge. But shrimp, we think of as being tiny, right? If something's shrimp or shrimpy, right, we think of it as small, tiny. So jumbo shrimp, right? Jumbo being big, shrimp being tiny. How can jumbo shrimp be jumbo? Right? That's an oxymoron. Small crowd. Right? When we think of something being a crowd, we think of it as being a bunch of people, a lot of people. So a small crowd. A small crowd doesn't seem like it could be a bunch of people, does it? Only choice. Only means one. So if it's your only choice, do you really have a choice? Right? You're not really choosing anything if it's the only choice. Those are oxymorons, right? They go against themselves, they contradict, right? How can something be jumbo and shrimp? How can a crowd be small? Right? How can a group of a bunch of people be small? How can a choice really be a choice if it's the only thing? Right? For example, if your family says your only choice right now is to do your homework, you're not choosing anything. The only thing you can do is your homework. Alliteration. Alliteration is fun, and it's going to make you think of tongue twisters. Alliteration is the repetition of the same beginning sound in a series of words. Here are some examples. Sally sells seashells by the seashore. Right? Notice in that sentence, many of the words start with S, right? Sally, sells, seashells, seashore. Big bears bicycle backwards while balancing bananas. Right? Look at all those words, right? Beginning with B, B, right? Big, bears, bicycle, backwards, balancing, bananas. Did Dana and Doug dirty the dozen dishes? So in that one, scholars, our repetition of the same beginning sound is a lot of words start with D, did, Dana, Doug, dirty, dozen, dishes. So alliteration is the repetition of the same sound at the start of a lot of the words in that sentence or phrase. Hyperbole. A hyperbole is an exaggeration for effect, right? You want someone to get the effect of what you're saying, so you exaggerate. Some examples, and you've maybe said some of these. My homework took 8 million years to finish. Right? Scholars, that's an exaggeration, right? None of us is going to be living for 8 million years. So, how does it take 8 million years to finish your homework? It doesn't. It's an exaggeration, right? When you say that, the effect is you want someone to know that it took you a long time to do your homework. Then this one, your backpack weighs a ton. Right? None of our backpacks actually weigh a ton. A ton is 2,000 pounds, and none of us would be able to pick up a backpack that weighed that much. So your backpack weighs a ton. You're exaggerating for the effect of someone knowing your backpack is really heavy. That was $1 million feast. Well, scholars, hopefully none of us are spending $1 million on a meal, right? But the idea of exaggerating for that, the effect is you want people to know, wow, this was quite a fancy, fine, beautiful, great feast. That was $1 million feast. Idiom. An idiom has a different meaning than what it says. Here are some examples. The test was a piece of cake. Now, unfortunately, scholars, that does not mean the test was actually a piece of cake, although we'd all be okay probably taking tests if they were cake. The test was a piece of cake doesn't really mean the test was a piece of cake. It means the test was easy, right? Someone would say, if it's a piece of cake, it was easy, right? It wasn't very hard. Our car cost an arm and a leg. That idiom, scholars, means that the car was expensive. It does not mean the car actually cost an arm and a leg, right? You didn't have to give someone an arm and a leg to get the car. It means it was expensive. Hold your horses. Maybe you've heard someone say that one to you. Right? Hold your horses means like just a moment. I'll be with you in a moment. Hang on just a second, right? Something like that. But it doesn't actually mean hold your horses because, well, first, most of us don't have horses. And second, it would be hard to hold your horses. Those are called idioms, right? They don't actually mean what it says. Like the words don't actually mean what they say. We had one at the very beginning of this lesson. If you remember the one that said it's raining cats and dogs, that's an idiom, right? It doesn't actually mean it's raining cats and dogs. It means it's raining hard or raining a lot. So, scholars, today we learned about several different kinds of figurative language. And that's a lot, 8 of them: simile, metaphor, personification, onomatopoeia, oxymoron, alliteration, hyperbole, and idiom. Now, scholars, I want to remind you that there is a link to click on in the instructions that gives you a guide to all of these in one nice sheet. Plus, I'm going to put a copy of that sheet in the resources topic on our classwork page so that you always can go to that and find it if you need it. You are very welcome to use that guide on today's quiz, right? Don't think of it so much as a quiz, but as questions for you to practice using these types of figurative language. So you can go back through this video and look at pieces of information, listen to it again if you need to. You can use the guide, but your assignment now is to open that Google form quiz on figurative language and complete those questions. Remember, hit submit at the bottom of that form. And then, scholars, be ready to watch for and read for figurative language as we spend the next few weeks reading The One and Only Ivan. There's a lot of rich figurative language in there for us to find. See you next time.